Okay, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About, where each week we dive into a new technology topic to share some information around what's going on in the world for technology and how it can help business. My name is John Hetherington. I work for WeDeliverYourVision.com. And my goal is to share knowledge with you folks and help you ultimately save time and get more time back in your day. And today, really pleased to have Steve join me from Mission X. So hello, Steve.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, pleasure. So AI.
That's a big topic.
Yeah, it is. Let's dig into that. But before we do, I'm just looking down the attendee list. I've got a few people joining in now. And folks, if you have any questions, just drop them into the chat, and we'll bring them up and make sure we get your key questions answered. But just while waiting for people to start putting in the questions, maybe Steve, let's just jump into it with AI in general, because there's so much chatter and news around AI and how it's going to take over our jobs and ChatGPT. So, what's your perspective on AI and everything to do with that area?
Yeah, so I've been working with technology since 2004, off and on, and the same issues have arose since 2004. Technology is going to take away my job, and so far everybody I've seen are still working.
Yeah,
I think the big thing what I see is that it actually every time I've seen technology implemented, it actually reduces the things that we don't like to do. And it makes us allows us to be more creative and do the things that we do like to do. So I think with the AI and like ChatGPT, I mean, I'm not sure if you use ChatGPT, but
a lot. Yeah, I love it.
Me too. But I've never actually sent something that I've just actually asked ChatGPT to put together. I mean, I know that Reid Hoffman might. He claimed that he wrote a book with ChatGPT. I'm not Reid Hoffman, but I would suspect that there's still some editing, because everything that I've pulled off of that, it's like maybe the first draft or the second draft, but it's not polished. And I think that's the issue with, and maybe we'll get there. I don't know, but we still have the nuances of communication that I think is inherently human.
Yeah, the interpretation and. Same experience I have as well. It's whenever I've used ChatGPT, it helps round out my thinking. I use it as a brainstorming tool, and it all comes down to how good the questions are. And when you first start in there, it's like, what is cloud or something like that? You ask it, what is AI? And then you ask it some jokes as well around, what do you think, ChatGPT and things like that. But then what I found really useful is you act like a persona to do something in the context of this, and this. And the first answer is never that good,
right?
But then you iterate. So one example is I had to write a communication for my team, introducing a new project manager to take over the project. So I said, act like a technology senior manager, introducing a new project manager to the team. The team's been through some challenges. We're making good progress, a lot ahead of us. Please write a communication of less than 500 words in a relaxed conversational tone. And so I got a first version and I said, okay, great. And I said, actually, no, can you pull out 3 key points? So it did another version as well. And that's where I found it really useful. It's just to help that thinking and that crafting of a message.
And so what AI didn't do for you is the whole thought around, what do I want to communicate? Right?
Right. Yes.
So you actually had to think of that yourself. You actually had to do that. And I keep on telling my kids is that be the person who can ask that question. Because you get a lot of people who say, well, just write this, and you're not getting the detail. And I think if we can start imagining how, like from that persona, I love that idea. I'm actually going to implement that in my searches now, is from that persona and add some of the really important things. Like you said, they've been through a lot. Well, what, and maybe even get more specific. And I think that is the work of human beings still, is that refining, because there's that whole emotional side that you need to be aware of. we're not robots. Your team isn't robots, and you don't know that this is the 3rd p.m. and they're late and they're over budget and one of the team members having a baby, but the baby's premature. Now that's adding stress, and there's all these things that go on that I think that inherently again are the human side. Yeah. But we can ask ChatGPT to be actually do the technical part.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where I find AI and ChatGPT in general it's actually forcing us to be, as humans, to be more creative, because if you just ask the question, you get a crappy answer, quite frankly. But if you're creative in how you use the tool, and I don't know if you've seen any of the art, the DALL-E or Midjourney art. Have you seen any of that?
No, not yet.
Oh, it's amazing. But again, if you look at the quality of the art that comes out of these AI generated,
okay.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah. But when you dig into how they create that, you have to give the AI very, very specific instructions. And I'm not a photographer or scene artist by any stretch, but you just say, go create me a picture of a person standing in the shadow of a mountain, get some pretty basic results. But when you want to create the shadow, you want to create the soft focus, when you want to create the sunlight coming in at a certain angle, you have to describe that. It's still a tool to do that.
And it's funny because I find myself, I don't know about you, but I feel more alive and more engaged in my work when I start thinking, and when I'm allowed to be creative. I think that's when work starts getting a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah.
And like, I hate the starting of a document. Just this where you like the 0 to 1. And I think that's where I think we need to realize that 0 to 1 is already done for us. Now we get to start thinking and imagining and creating. And I think we're actually created to be creative. So whether I'm an engineering firm or a marketing firm, like the actual doing the work and the building of the power plant or the email marketing campaign, I think that's where people get that. That's the fun part. At least for me, it is.
Yeah, totally. And let's actually dig deeper into that one as well, because I know you're heavily involved in how you're applying AI to the business world.
Right.
And I love the idea of using AI to help me in the business. I'm sure everyone does. Again, it's to what we were chatting about earlier. It's not replacing our jobs; it's enhancing our work.
Yeah.
So particularly in the work management space, automation, you're doing a lot of work in that area with a tool.
Excuse me, my ride's here.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, he's late for his dinner, as one of the UK comedians would say. But so maybe let's talk about that actually, because you mentioned how I know you're doing some work in using AI for project management, technical project management, which I know a lot of people are going to be really interested to hear more about as well. So maybe if you could just expand on that in some areas.
I'd love to. So but before I do, let's just set it up. Let's think about 3 personas. All right. So the first persona that we're talking about is I'm a senior level manager, CEO, COO, CFO. What are the things that I need? And then, so we'll talk about that persona. The second persona we'll talk about is I'm a project manager. I've got like maybe 5 or 6 projects and I'm managing 50 people all together and trying to make sure that that's all going together well. And the right things are getting done at the right times. And then let's think about the user itself. So I'm actually on staff.
Yeah. Right? And just as we jump into that as well, thanks, Eric, for your comment there as well around AI created to be creative. So as we're framing up our discussion here as well, it's just building on Eric's point. Yeah, great point, Eric. It's exactly that. It's helping us be more creative.
That's an excellent point. So I've been talking to a few, like let's say the employee, the staff, person on staff, and so I'd ask the question, how do you plan for your day? And they'd say, well, what I do before I go to bed is I write down the tasks that I want to complete for the next day, and then I go to bed. So I asked the question then, well, and this is multiple people I've asked this to, and a lot of times they'll say, well, I'd ask, do you ever forget anything? They're like, yeah, I wake up and then I have to go put it back. But I have to put that task back on my list, right? So you're never really getting this sleep, right? You're always thinking, oh God, what do I got to do? And there's a little bit of this, what am I going to do for the next day, and making sure that I'm doing the right things. Now, how we go about that is we use AI to prioritize and curate all the tasks that are assigned to me. And
Okay.
the thing about AI, what it can do better than humans is it can go through massive amount of scenario and data that I can't go on. So I may only have this a small portion of the picture, and from my standpoint, where I'm seeing it, I'm doing the right things. I'm doing the most important things.
Hmm.
But what about when it comes to the overall viewpoint of the organization that I'm working for, or the company, or the customer? Am I considering the size of the projects? So do I know all the projects? The size of the customer. Is the customer tied to a strategic goal? Is there something important about that customer? Is it a brand new customer that I'm trying to win? Is there any dependencies? I may not have that viewpoint. So what we do is we, like, when you wake up in the morning and use our application, what you see, the first screen you see is a prioritized task list based
Right.
upon things that I would never be able to ascertain on myself. Or if I did, it would take a lot of work. That's a really great way to use AI. So now the
Hmm.
guy, instead of planning your day the night before, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm not even going to worry about it because I know, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, the customer's going to be happy, my manager's going to be happy, and the senior management will be happy.
Or love this concept. So two questions spring to mind. First is, how is it deciding the priority? And then secondly, where is it getting its information from? Maybe related questions, but yeah, how do we
Yeah, those
trust
are
the
two
AI, I
separate.
think is the question.
Well, and that's exactly it. So I think in this realm of AI, I don't like we have that view to be able to see the what's most important, but it's also important to give the user an overall view of everything that I have to do,
Hmm.
just in case they don't trust the AI. But we're looking at any like critical path. Am I on critical path? What project is on critical path? What is there anybody waiting for me?
Hmm.
Is there a dependency that I don't know of? Like, so they're waiting for me to finish my piece of work so it can move on. What is the size? Again, I said this before, but the size of what's the value of the project or the value of
Right.
the customer, overall customer. So if I have a customer that's spending $3 million a year on me, and we're servicing a $3 million a year customer or a $30,000 a year customer, and I only have a finite amount of work, like time in my day, I'd rather disappoint the one that's 30,000.
Hmm.
But that may change too because that 30,000 may be an opportunity for a $3 billion. Like there's so many factors that I just don't know that the AI can start training and learning. And that's a beautiful part about AI is that as you start, like you have your startup pipe, as you start getting into the production pipe of the AI, it can start actually learning um, more and more and taking more things into consideration.
Hmm. And I think, and just to expand on that as well, because one of the frustrations around the to-do list is it never ends because that's a to-do list. You can always add to it. The frustration I'm sure other people get into as well is I have some priorities I've defined for me, and my day is derailed when something changes and I can't
Yeah.
get to those priorities
Mhm.
because everyone has their own priorities.
Right.
So is AI a way to ultimately coordinate those priority lists?
So I think in overall, like the overall, yes,
Hmm.
but you're going to get derailed from right. So I mean, if you're thinking by like a day by day, I think, and that's the beauty about being human. My wife called and the kids are sick, so I have to leave.
Hmm.
Like you
Yes.
can't predict that, right? So then the next day, the priority starts again. Um,
But but in that scenario though, is it reflecting on other people's to-do list to say, actually, because
yeah,
Steve's out of the office
absolutely.
today, we're
Yeah.
going to bump this, or we need to bump this to tomorrow?
Right, and the AI
Yeah.
would be able to.
Yeah.
So again, it helps with all that. And the other thing too that's really interesting, if you do the AI model, we all have our biases of what we like to do, and
Hmm.
we tend to do the things we like to do first, even though they
Yes.
may not be important, right? So, I mean, there's that value as well.
Yeah, there's those the productivity tips around, tackle the hardest thing first and things like that, which I always get a little bit, just because it's hard, is it the right thing to do? To your
Right?
point, sometimes the easiest thing is actually the right thing to do, but
Mhm.
how do you know for sure that's the most important thing? And that's where the AI can help, because so what I'm hearing, Steve, is it has that organization perspective, because we have our lenses, our interpretation, and we're using AI to help us with that decision-making prioritization
Right.
activity.
And when we think, we also have to realize that AI doesn't have biases.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
now we do. And
Yep.
so, like, to your point, should I tackle the hardest thing to do? No, like, let's take all the biases out and let's just work on what's most critical right away.
And AI tells me to do that.
It's like,
I'm doing it because AI told me to.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it is, because again, it's knowing. So going back, taking that up a level in terms of setting the priorities, how is ultimately the AI guided? Because I mean, when we bring in AI into an organization, it's obviously making important decisions.
Right.
So how does that work?
So it's kind of like when we started talking about ChatGPT, right? You have to set it up. So in our for instance, in Mission X, you have to have a project manager, and you set your project up in Mission X. So the project manager will then put together the tasks, assign the team, and then that's really the only work that you have to do. But the problem that the project manager has is now I'm looking for data, or I'm compiling data, or I'm presenting the data. And I'm trying to keep track of all my budgets. So as you're working now, automation is really important, not just AI.
Right.
So how do you automate? So I'm doing a bit of work. How do I automate so make sure my budgets are up to date? How do I make sure that the right, like I can see if something's like a critical path and tasks aren't getting done. And I think that the technology, the new, like what we're not just AI, but technology in general needs to be able to build so that I don't have to actually manually do that. Because all AI should be doing is taking and automation is reducing the manual work.
Yeah.
So now if I can look at, can you imagine at real time, I know exactly what my budget is. I know my timelines are being kept. I can see if things are like the conversations now that I'm having, and I've seen this happen before in some of our customers. So I'll ask project managers or department leads. I'm like, now that you're not looking for this data and it's right there, what are you doing? And I'm getting very interesting feedback. Like a lot of senior, really experienced people are telling me that now I'm coaching more junior people.
Right.
And they're enjoying that. They're enjoying telling them about, here's my experiences and this is how we made things better. And I think that just builds on a platform. So it's just freeing up people's time again. So the conversation is, should you worry about AI and technology? I think in general about taking my job. And I don't think you should, because now,
no, not at all. No.
I think it makes it a place where I don't have to do the things that are frustrating with me, and I'm engaged because I'm actually giving back. I'm giving my knowledge for these people, or I'm able to tell the client that, hey, listen, we're going to run out of budget because of I'm able to take my time and have meaningful conversations instead of taking and wasting my time just like trying to make sense of things.
Yeah, exactly that. And a lot of the projects I'm called in to help, either to kick off or to rescue, around where the communication's broken down, something's happened that wasn't expected. So great example is where a statement of work goes to the CIO or a CEO for sign off, and they didn't expect it, and suddenly they have to sign it that day, and otherwise the project's derailed. And it's okay, so well, where did this come from? And that's where I love the concept of having AI give me a heads up that on this critical path, in this timeline, the statement of work is going to need to be signed. So back to your priority list, hey, heads up, this statement of work needs to be reviewed. And so much of our time is taken with document reviews and approvals and sign-offs. So the AI helping that is awesome. And then also, to your point around the automation, it's starting to route the document to the right people. So you don't have to go, okay, who's it gone to, checking the emails to see who's reviewed it last, where is it in my workflow tool in SharePoint? No. All that goes away with the AI. Right. So that's what and then to your point, that's not taking away my job. That's helping me do a better job.
Right. And then you think about too, like, so one of the things we do is allocating all the resources for that. So I'm building, like you talked about building. So if you're looking at, I need a role. So I have all these projects. I need these roles to finish the projects. And you take that over an organization, I think the allocation of those resources become very difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
And then so you have teams of people with the matrices trying to like slot you into different areas of work. But then you have also project managers and team leads that have biases. And you know what? I like working with John, even though we goof off all the time and we maybe not be the best team together. Or maybe your skills are better used at a different location or a different project. AI can help with that. And we do that all the time, like that resource management piece on making sure. So if you think about the beginning and my task manager, making sure I'm doing the right thing. What's most important? And now we take resources and making sure that people are allocated to the right. So the right person is doing the right thing at the right time. Senior management just have a breath of fresh air because you're not getting, things aren't getting dropped.
No,
and I'll give you an example of that. So we were working with a company, and so they're an engineering firm, and they had a bid that it was a large bid. It was $20 million worth of engineering, and so they responded to the RFP, sorry, and they filled out the RFP, and everybody got busy and started doing work. And the RFP needed to be submitted at 12 o'clock. 10 o'clock, the CEO was telling us, he was like flabbergasted that nobody actually reread or proofed the document. They just got it done. Everybody assumed it was done.
Right.
Because and inherently, how do you point fingers in that? Because we all get busy.
Yeah.
And we forget about the critical thing. And so the result is they had a no bid on a $20 million project.
No way.
They were really, And I hear that happens quite often.
Yeah, and going related to that as well, when people often ask me what's the number one cause of project failure, and there are many, but one of the key root causes that I'm often called in to help with is setting the project up correctly from the start. And this goes back to that RFP, is like, how do we set this up to get responses? That's our goal, is to get responses. So what are the steps we need to do to achieve that? And making sure that project is set up the right way. So having all the sponsors involved, or the right stakeholders, the right documentation available, the proof reviewing of the RFP in that example. Again, it's making sure that's all done, and having an AI help with that coordination, that checklist is going to make our lives so much easier ultimately. And then free us up to, as you mentioned before, is to be more creative, focus on relationships. Another key aspect is it's going to make us have to focus more on presentation skills, communication, storytelling, because we're getting so much more information and insights from the AI. We have to translate that and then provide it in information to our stakeholders, customers, team, everything else. And that's where I spend a lot of my time, is translating messages into a status on a project or a program, and then making sure, back to your other point around making sure the right people are allocated. How do you convince them to free up the resources to work on your project? Whereas if the AI is actually managing that resource balancing for you by saying, here's the right allocation of people. We should touch on timesheets in a minute as well, because how does it know how much time? But anyway, we'll come back to that in a second. How making sure it's the right skills, the right allocation of people, and then balancing it as the project's peak and trough, because maybe it's stalled for a bit, waiting on a vendor response. The amount of projects I go through where we're just having to reset the project and make sure we've got the right team allocated is so important.
Right. And so, like, to your point here, you made a very important point, is that and I just had this conversation with a colleague, and it's not when, it's not if, it's when Murphy comes and visit. He's always visiting in project. I'm not sure about you, but man, that guy shows up at the wrong time all the time. But AI is quicker to make the decisions, right? Or give you ideas. And so we can actually even predict budgets. Are you going to run out of budgets? Are you going to run out of time? Do you have enough people? So AI can also do that predictive. So instead of when Murphy comes, you're always kind of one step ahead. And not saying that every project's going to be like on time and on budget using AI, but it will reduce the expense and the blow of Murphy.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where a project manager, project portfolio manager always comes in. There's that human element to adjust, adapt,
right,
pivot quickly, spot, be intuitive. So when you say, when we heard around, will AI replace our jobs? It's like, no, it won't replace a project manager or technical lead or a senior leader as in its current role. It's just doesn't work that way. But it will replace people who don't use AI, because the people who don't use AI and technology as it advances will get left behind.
Yeah, and organizations will be left behind. Like, I'm really, actually, John, that's a really good. I mean, we should probably have another conversation just on that, because, one of my favorite quotes is, when the rate of change outside of an organization is greater than the rate of change inside of an organization, the end is near. And with what we're seeing in the technology space and how fast we're changing, the biggest problem I see is that the human beings we can't change as fast as the technology field is changing. And that in itself is causing a lot of stress and anxiety. So I mean, and that's where you come in, right? Where you're an expert at helping manage that, and we need more people. So you're talking about, does AI replace that? Well, no, we need more people like you, John, that will be able to help companies navigate through this realm, because I think the companies who become nimble and able to, again, it goes down to the question. So what do I want to create? Because we've always been told by the tools that we're using, we have to do business in a certain way.
Yes.
Now, if the tools are becoming more modern, we actually can sit back and say, okay, what does that flow what should the workflow be? Right. And so now we can be more creative in that workflow. And I think it'll take some visionaries to actually help management and change, and people to accept that and actually be excited about it. Because once you really realize what's happening, this is a pretty exciting time to live.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. There's so much. The democratizing of technology is huge. I mean, imagine ChatGPT is free, and I mean, we've got millions of dollars worth of power, of computing power, available for free to use whenever we want. So it's like, who'd have thought that even 2 years ago? So if we think of where we are now, imagine in 5 years' time what's available for free. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, and just keeping, like you say, you can't uninvent technology. So it's gonna come at us, and the quicker we embrace it and then leverage it, and people always ask me, I don't know where to start. I'm too busy on the day job, and that's fine. We're all busy, but just keeping awareness, listening to YouTube, shows like this, just to dabble into what's going on. YouTube's a great resource for anything, and LinkedIn is a great resource for anything like this.
And even the conversation around coffee, right? The coffee shop this morning is, I think those things are exciting.
Right.
I mean, just have an open, we're not going to replace, technology is not going to replace you. It's going to improve.
Yeah.
And first of all, as somebody who's listening to this LinkedIn Live, I would really encourage you on just taking that and just really resonating that inside of you. Because once you realize that technology could be very helpful, I think that takes away the fear. And then once the fear's gone, now you can start thinking and being creative.
Yes. So here's a interesting question I wanted to, as a father and of kids at school, and I've heard of schools banning ChatGPT, and on first glance I can see why, but then I would actually counter that to say, if the student is being creative with ChatGPT to come up with a better quality essay, document, whatever, that is a skill we should recognize. Again, we don't necessarily assess the essay because something else may have created that for us, ChatGPT, but the creativity to create a good essay can be then compared to others. So there's a creative element we need to recognize there. And then I'd actually then just thinking, expanding that as more, why don't the teachers use ChatGPT to grade the papers, because they can cut and paste the essay in and say, give me a summary evaluation of this based on this, and this criteria. So again, huge possibility, but I'm just curious, as a father yourself, what's your perspective on that?
So I have a few thoughts on this, and this comes to the point of the technology has grown faster than the school system. The school system wasn't ready to, and so and if you're thinking about what we're doing here, it's communicating, it's learning how to ask the question, and so maybe we need to start developing curriculum just around ChatGPT, for instance.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And then maybe we need to be able to, and I'm not sure if we're there yet, but there could be, ChatGPT. You can use ChatGPT for these assignments. But for this assignment, you really need to learn how to have sentence structure. And you need to learn how. I want your own thoughts, right? Like, which is, do we really have our own thoughts now? Maybe that critical thinking is a little bit more of what we should be teaching. So there's a lot of questions, and as a father, I have a lot of questions. I don't think there's just one right answer, and I think that's what we need to consider is, okay, what do we want in the future? And I want my kids to be able to use technology.
Exactly.
And I want them to be able to adapt, but I also want them to have the raw skills of, like, what's 5 times 5?
Yes, exactly. Right? To be able to remember a cell phone number, things like that, which I sometimes struggle with myself. I know my own and my wife's, and that's about it. So as we so this has been awesome. Just to see, I always like to finish up on how do you get started, because a lot of these topics are sometimes a bit far out there. AI is very much close to home now because everyone has access to it, but we've got a lot of listeners who are taking time out of their day to listen to this, and then they've got to go back to their busy day jobs of dealing with emails, meetings, and back-to-back Zoom calls and Teams calls. So take a step back, and what's a good way to get started with AI?
So like, again, if you want to go to missionnext.ai, there's a free version, and if you're using if you're doing like any project management, use these free versions. Look at the YouTube, like, there's tons of YouTube videos on, like, we have a YouTube channel. ChatGPT, just start using it.
Yeah, exactly.
Start educating yourself. Be curious.
Yeah, I'd agree. And start with, just to build on that as well, is start with a specific question. Like I said, I used it recently for a communication to for my team on one of the projects I was helping launch. Also used it for interview questions when I've been hiring for my team. Right. I have a list of questions I think are good, and I've just put into ChatGPT. I've said, okay, hey, ChatGPT, act like a business owner recruiting this level of person. What questions would I ask them to evaluate them against this performance? And you list out some of the performance and roles, responsibilities of the role. So again, that's a very specific problem right there, right now. And I just say, okay, I'll just bounce that off ChatGPT. So I got with something small.
So I would actually just go to ChatGPT and ask him how to get started.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yes, yeah. But again, so to your point, build on the context. So as an accountant in a small to mid-size financial services company selling wood products to North American customers, how would I get started with AI? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, give that.
And it's amazing and then actually go use the old search engine, Google. Yeah. And Google how to use ChatGPT. I did that, and I was amazed on the creativity of other people. Rising tides floats a lot of boats, and I know some people don't like that saying, but I like it, because if we're free to give our thoughts and learn from others, it just rises, right? And that's how technology is advancing so fast. A bunch of people are sharing like this, right? What you're doing, John.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love this series and having guests like yourself on there, just to share the knowledge and help people move along with these hot topics, which often people find overwhelming. And it all comes down to just break it down to something simple to start with, and hook
me up on LinkedIn if you want to get started. If you want to grab a coffee and have a conversation around AI, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So so Steve, if people want to find out more about you and the company, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best.
Right.
Yeah,
Perfect. And then I know you have
LinkedIn.
some YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel and missionx.ai. You can start building your own free version of the tool. And if you have any needs, just either contact John or myself, and I'd be happy to walk you through. And just even if you just want a conversation and talk about technology and AI and where do we think we could use that to improve our lives, I love that conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. Perfect. So I'm just going to quickly check we had a couple of other questions come in, but they're actually quite in depth. So we'll actually respond to people directly. So thank you folks for the questions. They're interesting, and we covered a lot of them already. I was monitoring them as they came in. So I hope everyone enjoyed that, and really appreciate your time. And we'll see you again next week at the same time for another Let's Talk About LinkedIn Live event, where we'll dive into another technology topic. So
thanks,
Steve. We'll chat again soon.